This is Lessebo, a small town in the province of Småland in Sweden. Less than 3,000 people live in this town, and it's most famous for its handpaper mill and for being close to other famous places. It lies in the middle of the Kingdom of Crystal in Sweden, an area famous for its glassworks. But there's no glass workshop in Lessebo. If you drive to the west of Lessebo, you get to the quickly expanding city of Växjö with its bustling university. And if you drive to the east, you arrive at the historical city of Kalmar with its magnificent castle. But in Lessebo, there's not really all that much to see. So why am I visiting this little town that apparently has nothing special to offer? Well, that's because I used to live here between 1987 and 1997, and I wanted to talk about a rural town in Sweden where I could add some personal notes. This is gonna be a pretty intimate look at what it's like to grow up in a small town in Sweden. It had its ups and downs, a lot of downs to be honest, but maybe this video will show you a bit of what it's like in Sweden outside of the big cities. So let's get right to it. Let's have a look at a pretty typical rural town in Sweden. The center of Lessebo can be described in many ways. Small, quaint, unassuming, boring, adequate, and many other words. It's got a few grocery stores and a couple of pizza places that also serve as pubs, and even a Systembolaget, the state-owned liquor store. There's a library, a church, and a health clinic, basically all the bare necessities. The center of Lessebo looks small, but it's actually grown a bit since I moved in here. When I was 16, this house and a Coop grocery store opened, and my little punk band played at the opening ceremony. We were awful, and I'm still not sure why we got to play there, probably because no other kids were having a band in this town. I'm noticing that a couple of stores have closed since I lived here, but there's also a few new restaurants in the center of Lessebo, and the population has increased as well. Not by much, but there might be 100 more people now compared to back then. It's still not exactly a thriving town, despite that. Lessebo used to be famous for its handcrafted paper, and it still is. The mill is more than 300 years old, and it's the most famous landmark of Lessebo. The nearby woods were perfect for making paper, so this became a very important paper-making town back in the olden days. And it was a major employer for lots of people in the area. But things changed over the years, and the mill wasn't as profitable as it once was. It was sold multiple times in the late 90s and early 2000s, and it filed for bankruptcy in 2012 and 2013. And then again in 2018. After that, it was basically running on life support between 2019 and 2022 until it filed for bankruptcy once more. It's still up and running, somehow, but it's not the thriving source of employment that it once was. Other businesses have popped up instead, but nothing has really taken off. Lessebo is a small town that's getting by, but not much more. Oh, and speaking of the handpaper mill, in the early 1900s, a sulfite mill was added as well. That's good for the paper mill, but it also gave the town a bit of a reputation. The sulfite mill smells a lot. People driving through Lessebo often complain about the stench. It's not the best reputation for a town to have. And speaking of reputation, Lessebo doesn't really have the best reputation. A lot of things have happened in this little town. There was a knife fight where one person was killed in the 90s, I think. And one person was murdered with an axe after that. And there was another murder in 2011, and a young woman was murdered in 2024 as well. That's quite a bit of murders for such a small town. Almost sounds like a UK crime drama. And the town has also been infamous for drugs and crime, not like Chicago or the streets of LA, but more than you'd expect from a rural town in Sweden. And there's also been a bit of controversy surrounding immigrants. When you listen to the news, you might believe that the current kerfuffle between Swedes and immigrants is a pretty new thing, but it's not. There's been a lot of Ukrainians who've come to Lessebo, and before that there's been people from, for example, Somalia and Afghanistan. But before that there's been people from Southeast Asia, from the Balkans and from South America. There's basically been an influx of immigrants to Lessebo from the 1980s up until today, and Lessebo municipality also accepts a lot of refugees. Which is a bit ironic, because since it's a rural town in the middle of Småland, people are also mildly racist. Or maybe not racist per se, they're just skeptical of anyone who doesn't act like themselves, regardless of where they come from. I grew up in Lessebo, but I wasn't born here. My family moved here from Stockholm when I was a small kid. Actually, I lived in Skruv as well for a year before that. Skruv is a village that's even smaller than Lessebo. Coming to a rural town as an outsider is difficult, especially in Sweden. There's a lot of amazing things about rural towns in Sweden. There's a great sense of community, and the towns themselves are often quite lovely. But Sweden is a conformist society, and you need to fit in, especially in small communities. I lived here for more than 10 years, but it never really felt like home. The close-knitted community in places like this is great for people who were born here, but it does keep outsiders at a distance. Especially if you're an outsider who has esoteric interests. You like to read instead of play football? You freak! You're into fantasy and sci-fi? What kind of nerdy crap is that? You want to mess around with computers instead of talking about cars and mopeds? That's so weird. And it doesn't help that I'm also half Finnish and half Yugoslavian, and I don't really share all the traditional Swedish values. So while Lessebo was my home for a decade, it was never really where I belonged. Lessebo train station used to be quite bustling many decades ago, with many trains stopping here. And to be honest, there's actually still quite a few trains that stop here. But I wouldn't exactly call it bustling. There's also buses that will take you to nearby towns, but most people go everywhere by car. Rural Sweden is almost a bit like America, isn't it? Across the train tracks you will find some industrial areas by Läen and Öjen. I used to go fishing here as a kid and jump around in piles of sawdust by a sawmill. But the sawmill is long since gone, and they've also closed off a lot of the areas by the lake, so I can't find my old fishing spots. It's amazing how many things have changed in, well, 20 to 25 years. But it's also quite amazing how many things are exactly the same. On the east side of town there's a bigger lake called Läen. Läen is where the town beach is located. Kids swim here and jump off the diving tower. Except they don't swim here right now, of course, because it's March. And it seems like the diving tower is gone as well. I have pretty fond memories of Läen, actually. I used to spend a lot of time in the water here, or hanging out with friends. Even though I hurt myself pretty badly one summer jumping off the diving tower. But it's all fun and games. We used to bike down to the beach and watch the sunset and look at all the camping tourists. We swam in the creeks nearby and we took late-night walks in the forest paths close to the lake. There are no lights along the paths, so it gets extremely dark at night, but it was a cozy kind of dark. There's also a couple of schools in Lessebo, Hackebackeskolan for the small kids and Bikupan for the older kids. I don't really have all that fond memories of these schools. There were some nice people here, but also a lot of bullies. Then again, kids can be pretty bad everywhere. They might have grown up to be fine, upstanding citizens. I wouldn't know though, because I haven't kept in touch with most of them. I'm sure that I must have had good times at school, but I mostly remember feeling sad or angry or alone or like I don't belong here. I was in a couple of fights at school, and after getting beaten to a pulp once I realized that I'm not very good at fighting. That was actually just around the corner there. I was always more into books and computers either way. That is, until I started high school and started a punk band with a couple of friends. There's not a lot to do in rural towns in Sweden. You either do sports or you drink yourself to oblivion, or you find something to engage yourself in. Computers and music became my thing. I probably spent equal time programming and playing the guitar. Badly. Possibly on both accounts. And drinking, I guess. I did a fair bit of that too. I was more happy once I started high school. I developed my punk persona and I partied a lot. Most people back then started drinking around the age of 15, some at 16, some at 14. It was illegal, of course, but everyone did it. You get hold of moonshine from various people, or you got someone older to buy liquor for you from Systembolaget. Or you raided your parents' liquor cabinet during house parties. There was always a way to find booze for your next party. I'm doing my best to stay objective about this little rural town in the south of Sweden, but it's difficult. I found a lot of people here close-minded and lacking in perspective. This is also the place where my mom's house burnt down and where my mom and my stepdad died. There are some amazing people here, but also many bad people and bad memories. I don't think I had a particularly good childhood, better than many, so I'm not complaining, but it probably wasn't all that good. And living in this town didn't help. I'd love to end this video on a happy note. I'd love to point out all the good things about living in a tiny Swedish town. But I don't think that I can do that, because this is my personal view of growing up in Lessebo. And I'm sure that there are thousands of people who love this place, but I'm afraid that I don't. And on that little bombshell, it's time to end this look at a tiny rural town in Sweden. I hope you found it interesting. Like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day.